Zack Snyder's Star Wars movie that's totally not a Star Wars movie, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, finally dropped on Netflix. Let's have a look.
When I found you in the wreckage of that ship, I considered leaving you. I was afraid you could bring trouble to us.
So the movie opens with a bit of narration from, I think it's Anthony Hopkins. I haven't checked IMDb, but I'm pretty sure it was him. His opening narration gives a bit of background in the kind of wider political climate of this fictional, space world, talking about the former king and the politics of it and whatnot, and it totally doesn't sound anything like Star Wars. But that's not where our main character is. Our main character is Cora. She is played by Sofia Boutella, who you may remember from the Tom Cruise Mummy movie. She plays Cora. She is living in one of the outer rim planets that's totally nothing like Tatooine. And she is just living a simple life. She's helping out on the farm. It's a simple community. They don't have a lot of technology. They do farming by hand, like with horses and, ploughs and things like that. So they're just getting by, doing their own thing. She's got a bit of a mysterious past, but none of the community really bother too much about that. Among the farming community, one of Cora's friends is Mikael Hausman. I think that's how you say his name. He kind of might have a bit of a thing for Cora, or maybe not. You don't really know too much at this stage. Everything is fine in the farming community. It's business as usual until it's not. Big bad spaceship arrives with big bad Admiral Bad Guy, played by Ed Skrein. Random trivia, both Ed Skrein and Mikael Hausman both played Daario Naharis on Game of Thrones. Big bad guy arrives, does what big bad guys do. They basically demand all of their grain, all of their stores. The farming community can't really deal with this. Things take a bit of a dark turn, people are killed, and our heroes, Cora, played by Sofia Boutella, and Gunnar, played by Mikael Hausman, they go to various different planets to recruit some soldiers to help them. We've got Charlie Hunnam's Kai, we've got Jaimin Hunsu's General Titus, to name but a few. That's pretty much it for the plot. That's what gets things off and running. But is it any good? It's actually okay. It's not terrible. It's not amazing. It kind of sits somewhere in the middle. There's been no secret made about the fact that I think this originally started life as a potential Star Wars story, and you can kind of see that throughout the movie. Even the opening narration, you could totally see that as a Star Wars crawl. Some of the characters, you could totally see them as, Stormtrooper-esque or, like Imperial Guard type people. As with most Zack Snyder movies, it's visually stunning. Like, it looks amazing. You've got your anamorphic lens flare going on, making it look like cool and cinematic. The shallow depth of field is there, but it's not overpowering. It's not distracting in the way that it was in, say, Army of the Dead. That was way too shallow depth of field focusy. So that's here, but it's not overpowering. Visually, it looks amazing. There's all the slow-mo action that Zack Snyder is famous for. That's all present and correct and works quite well. Some of the action set pieces, some of the fight scenes, they are very well made. With it being a sci-fi space epic movie, it's obviously very CGI heavy, but for the most part, the CGI is pretty top tier. There's only one or two shots or one or two scenes where I think the CGI was a tiny bit subpar, but for a Netflix movie, the CGI was as good, if not better, than a lot of movies that were released in the cinema this year. We're looking at you, Flash and Indiana Jones. The pace of the movie is interesting at times. This is part one. There's been no secret made about that. It's been announced that it was going to be split into two parts for quite some time. Part two, I think, is out in April on Netflix. Scargiver, I think, is the subtitle for that. Rebel Moon Part 2, Scargiver. So this is part one of a movie, and it definitely feels like that. This feels like half. It's not slow at any points, but as I said, on one hand, it feels like a part one. It feels like half of a movie, because it kind of is half of a movie. But on the other hand, it feels quite episodic at times. Almost video game-esque, like going through the levels, like our heroes as they go from planet to planet, recruiting the various different soldiers and fighters to help them on their cause. Like, each one of them feels like its own mini episode. Each one of them feels like a level in a video game. They go to a planet, they try and recruit X fighter. There's a mini mission they have to go on. X fighter has to show their skills and battle someone or do something to show that, so that they can show the audience that they're a fighter. So that does feel a little bit episodic at times, or like I said, like the levels of a video game. I can't do a Rebelman review without talking about Charlie Hunnam's accent.
For a small fee, obviously.
I think he's trying to do an Irish accent. Yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice, but ultimately, whatever accent he's doing, it just ends up being a little bit distracting. And that's, I'm a huge Charlie Hunnam fan. Sons of Anarchy was brilliant. I thought he was great in the Guy Ritchie movie, The Gentleman. I think whatever accent he does in The Gentleman, I think that's more or less his like walking around accent, everyday life. That's not the accent he uses in this movie. It's, like I said, it's kind of an Irish accent, I think. But yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice. Speaking of Celtic accents, if you'd like to see more movie reviews with a Scottish accent, then make sure you subscribe to the channel. So yeah, it looks great. It sounds great. The sound design is great. The opening scene is quite memorable. It reminded me actually of the opening scene in Inglorious Basterds, where you've got the Nazis coming to this small farm and kind of wreaking havoc. Now, I'm not comparing this movie to that movie. I'm not comparing Rebelman to Inglorious Basterds, but there is similarities there, and I mean that in a good way. Rebelman, that scene, the opening scene in Rebelman, it doesn't reach the heights of Inglorious Basterds, but it did kind of remind me of that. You've got the bad guy space soldiers in uniforms that are fairly reminiscent of Nazi uniforms. I don't think that's something they were trying to be subtle about. That these the bad guy soldiers kind of look like Nazis. To make sure the audience knows these are bad guys. Much like a lot of Zack Snyder movies, there's plenty of abs and pecs on show. There's one of the characters, I can't remember his name, but they pick him up on one of the planets to recruit him to their cause. He's introduced there, topless, working away, glistening abs and pecs. Then, they do their thing and this, that, and the other thing, and he joins the cause. And, so he gets dressed. But by getting dressed, I say he throws a shawl over his shoulders. So, his, perfectly chiselled pecs and abs are still there on show for the whole movie. I'm sure I read that this was Netflix's most expensive movie, big budgeted movie to date. Whether or not that has a return for them, who knows? I don't know how Netflix really, quantify or qualify the success of a movie or a TV show. So I'm going to go with 6 out of 10 for Zack Snyder's Rebelman Part 1, A Child of Fire. I am looking forward to Part 2 when it comes out in April. I think I'll probably have the opinion that once I've seen Part 2, I would have preferred this to be one movie rather than 2 movies cut in half. Like I said, the pacing in Part 1 was a little bit episodic at times. It could have maybe been tightened up a little bit. But yeah, we'll see when Part 2 comes out. Looking forward to that. That's us, folks. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you smash that like button. You can always subscribe to the channel here, and I will catch you on the next one.